Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Mastering Fundraising, the show where we explore real-world insights and practical strategies for nonprofit leaders who want to elevate their impact. So each episode, we sit down with experienced leaders in our sector to unpack not just what works, but why it works and how you can apply it to your own organization. And today's conversation is about something bold and necessary in today's philanthropic environment, and that's disruption. So not disruption for the sake of noise, but disruption that fuels movements. I'm thrilled to welcome Gloria Crockett to the show. Gloria is a seasoned nonprofit executive, strategist, and thought leader with decades of experience in philanthropy, organizational leadership, and movement building. And throughout her career, she has championed fundraising approaches rooted in equity, authenticity, and deep engagement, helping organizations move beyond transactional giving and into transformational partnership. Gloria brings a powerful perspective on what it means to lead with innovation, invitation, and to stand apart in a crowded landscape, and to create fundraising strategies that fuel real movements rather than just meeting annual goals. Gloria, welcome to the show. We're so glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here and talk about something I'm very passionate about, making a difference through fundraising.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the benefits of being in the fundraising field, is being able to make a huge difference. So why don't you take us back to the beginning, your beginning, if you will. What initially drew you into nonprofit leadership and fundraising?
Yes, well, it was a journey. I'll start out by saying that. Chris, I first, as a teenager and young adult, I volunteered a lot. I did the AIDS 6 Mile Walk. I did the Daffodil Days with the American Cancer Society. So all of those things were to my core. I developed a scholarship program for the Venture Club that I was a member of, which is a junior club of the Soroptimists. So all of these things were already built in me. And then after college, I, wanted to go into broadcast journalism, and
Okay.
very, very personal, changed what that looked like for me. And unfortunately, that change was my father passed away at 53 from lung cancer. And I said,
Oh
oh,
no.
we can't do this. And so I said, I'm going to go to the American Cancer Society and see how I can make a difference. And
Wow.
it was, it gives me chills thinking about it right now. I went into the organization in programs. I was a program coordinator. And 16 and a half years later, I left as the regional vice president and had so many phenomenal moments with donors, with volunteers. All of that just lifts you up. So I guess to get to the root of your question,
Yeah.
passion for the cause is how I got into
Good.
nonprofit.
Yeah. No, that's a wonderful story. I'm so glad to know it. And over the years, how has your philosophy about philanthropy evolved?
Oh gosh. I think it's from when you're starting out in programs and you see, you feel like you're in that lane of programs. And I was only in that lane for about a year. And then I became a generalist where there was more fundraising involved. And I think when you see the programs and the impact that they're making for in individuals' lives, and then you realize, okay, this takes funds. This takes donors. This takes grants. This takes corporate partnerships. It takes so much. And if we want to make a difference truly in what we're doing as an organization, we need to fundraise. We need to embrace it. And it's not solely, how I look at it is everyone in a not-for-profit is a fundraiser in one shape or form, and you
Yeah.
really have to say, okay, what is my part that I'm playing in this?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Are there experiences that have really shaped your belief that fundraising can fuel movements? What is it in your experience that gave you that belief?
Yes, yes. I would say there's one example that really, I guess, lit the fire under me.
Okay.
I was at I'd moved to Maryland and I was, put in charge of the state of Maryland, and we had an event called Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. And when I came in, the walk was making about 50 to 75 thousand in Baltimore. And this is a big event, right? And so I said, we need to follow the plan and we need to get people involved. And so what I really learned is that if you really build relationships, so I looked at the corporate lens and I said I needed to take a deeper dive into those relationships. I needed to understand what made them basically tick. And looking at those relationships, it helped me say to myself, well, we need to do things differently. And so I built strong relationships with several of the team captains. I had my team work with certain team captains and build those relationships. We invited them to a variety of events. And I think taking that event from, about that $70,000 mark to well over 1 million was like, wow. And you saw those people coming up to you, thanking you, high-fiving you, and saying, Gloria, we're creating a movement. Now, I want you to know that the last year while I was there was 6,000 people at that walk. And if
Wow.
it's not a movement, what is?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, amazing. That's so fun. And to be responsible or partially responsible for helping it arrive at that growth is so phenomenal and something I'm sure you look back fondly with your career. Um, I've known that leadership requires courage. I'm sure there have been moments in your journey where you've had to take a stand or push for different ways of doing things. And I know our listeners would love to hear a moment or two that really stands out for you where you had to push to do things in a different way.
Yes, I'm going to say that that is really probably around setting up a major gifts program and
Okay, do
what
tell.
to build that, because a lot of individuals, I feel like as leaders, you become stuck to a certain degree in what's been done before. And you've got individuals saying, well, we're grandfathered in at $2,500 or we're grandfathered in at 5,000. And you really need to take a step back and say, you know what, our brand and our mission is bigger than all of us put together. And what we need to do is we need to talk about why major gifts need to be a bit larger than that. And we need to tell the story differently. And it's about having the board involved in that conversation, having key corporate donors involved in that conversation, and really saying, it's time. It's time that we evolve. And yes, our major gift is going to be $25,000. And that may feel hard, but giving everybody the tools to feel confident in that is something that I've had to do at two different organizations. And it's, when people see that why that's so important and the fruits of your labor and saying, look, the data shows us this. And then also, I think something is key, Chris, that I often chuckle to myself. People say, I've always gotten that amount from that particular donor or corporation. And I said, well, did you look across at another event in this particular market? They're giving a little bit more. And that's because they asked and they told the story of why it's so important, but also they listened to that particular donor or corporation saying, what makes you feel like you're part of us? And we'd like you to help us solve for needing to get to a major gift of 25,000 as our benchmark.
Yep, yep. No, that's great. And that has been an interesting story for so many fundraisers to have to step into the entrepreneurial role of building a program, especially a major gifts program, where it's so foreign to most organizations. It's just like speaking a different language, and you have to be someone who can be the interpreter and then the teacher and then also the builder of that kind of program. So kudos to you for doing that. I did want to leave plenty of time for the topic of the day for our conversation, which is that topic of disruption. And when you use the word disruption in the context of fundraising, can you explain what you mean?
I think for me, it simply said start and stop doing things that are holding you back, to be creative and to say, you know what, sky's the limit. And to realize that excellence is important. And it's not excellence in that, we want to be perfect. It's not that excellence. It's the excellence of we want to make sure that donor experience is phenomenal. We want to make sure that we stretch and that we try to do the best that we can. And we also want to look at what is individuals' why. And when I think about donors and their experiences, we need to ask them, what would they like to see? Now, we're not going to necessarily change everything. We're going to have to say, yes, we can do this, or no, we're not able to do that. And I think for me, one of my biggest successes in this particular area was when I walked into the wonderful organization of Make-A-Wish. And I was there as the president and CEO. And we had a gala that was doing phenomenal things. And I was like, guys, let's ratchet it up. Let's get it to that next level. And I said, we can get $50,000 and $100,000 donors. We have to have conversations with these individuals that could potentially give that and find out what makes them feel like this is different. And we want to be a part of this and be a part of that movement of change. And I think getting your board involved in that and saying, we can do this is something that's really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. And why do you believe disruption is necessary in today's philanthropic landscape?
Oh my gosh. We have so many individuals and generations that give in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And I don't think that one size doesn't fit all. And we have to look at each particular group by generation, as well as, doing studies of who is giving to our organization and how are we going to focus on them. However, we still need to be attracting other individuals to get them involved. So let's say, for instance, individuals in their 20s and 30s, they really want to be part of the solution. They want to roll up their sleeves, find out a little bit more, do things differently. And so you have to adapt to that. And that is not always something that everyone wants to, wow, they're coming in my space. Well, no, they're coming in your space with expertise. Now let's
Yeah.
take their expertise and let's lift that to the next level by saying, hey, we would really love for you to help do an event for us. And, this is going to be your time to say, this is what it's going to look like, keeping within the parameters of not-for-profit, restraints. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it restraints, but best practices. We should only have costs being at this amount, talking about the importance of in kind. And so I think that looking at all of those segments and not forgetting about those monthly donors. People say, oh, monthly donors. I said, no, those are our best. Those are our best because you know what? They're going to leave us in their planned gift. And we need to talk to them about that because they're tried and true. And I'm going to be the first one to say that my mom gets so excited she just turned 83, at opening the mail and calling up. She does call now. She doesn't write a check, but calling up and giving a gift. And I think you have to recognize there's different segments. And then I think what's most important is when you're looking at doing things different, you're looking at these different generations. Donors want to know more about what are you doing? I think you need to be honest with them and also talk about your struggles. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think you should be comfortable saying, you know what, we don't have this all figured out and we need help with it. And
Yeah.
having donors say like, wow, that's really, really great. I think about banks, for instance. When you have banks that you're, doing corporate partnerships with, and, let them know about, hey, do you have anything that can help us build out our financial plan and our budgets for the next 10 years? This is something you do. You look at your investments. We'd love to have people come in and help teach us what they're experts at because, everyone has something to offer.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, you've said in the conversation that you need to shift from sort of can you give with donors and prospective donors to do you want to help make this possible? A different question altogether. What sort of changes when organizations lead with invitation?
I think, well, there's a couple of things. When you have an invitation, it's an invitation to join something. And to join something is much different than support something, in my eyes. When you look at, someone just writing a check or can you support us? Oftentimes, with so many philanthropic organizations out there, you may not get the size of gift you want. You may get, we all know, go away money. Don't let that panic rise in you that I have a goal to make in
Yeah.
6 months. You need to say, I really like you to come on this journey with me and learn about what we're doing. And what's most important, I want to learn about what's important to you and how we can fill up your cup with what we're doing as an organization because you're obviously attracted to it. And I want to know why. I
Hmm.
think it's important to have them share their why and say, well, what is there in that mix that could really help us? I think about grants that reach certain populations. Now, it may not be a program that we already have. However, it's this small little tweak that could be that still stays within our lane of our mission and our programs. It's okay to make that tweak if it's still hitting the populations we want to reach, and we're not completely changing our program of work and inviting those individuals into, help us do that program, help us bring it forward. I think that you know, making sure we're running our operations as a business and we're looking at that supply and demand and really saying, okay, is this demanded and who is making that demand of us?
Yeah, yeah. It seems as though this mindset reposition helps donors move from sort of being funders to collaborators, advocates, and investors. Is that the way you see it, or is it some other way?
No, no, most definitely. I think, once you have someone within your, let's say within your family of your not-for-profit, you bring them in, you've stewarded them, you've had those conversations, they become your loudest voice as an advocate. They become one of your biggest investors. They're the ones that's telling the story. And I think that the putting in the time on the front end and making sure that you're deepening those relationships is so important. And it's not okay, an event's coming up in 2 months, we better give them a call. We can't do that anymore. And I think for me, something that's been really important over the years is, I'm really sensitive about moving donors that I know from organization to organization. But what I do is I look to see if their name is on a list of donors once I get to that organization, because I know
Sure.
that I've got a very strong relationship with them. And as you begin to build those relationships and they become your advocate, they call you up and say, Gloria, I saw that you had a need to get X done at your organization. I have a contact that can help you with that. Would you like that introduction? And you're saying yes. That's because they believe in you. They believe in your organization. They believe in your team. They believe in your board. And they see all of these wonderful things happening. And I think what's most important with that is they're an advocate telling a story. They're a donor, a supporter telling a story. they're lending their voice to help you grow. And I think what's most important, you just have to keep stewarding that. And if you make a misstep, I'm sorry. How can I make that right? Because none of us are perfect. And I think that, being humble and saying, you know what, I can only do this much in my lane right now. I'm not going to be able to do that. But how can we make this work together is really, really important. And I think word of mouth with those individuals being your advocates, they become your storytellers and they bring other
Right.
people in. And I think that's the key. It's saying, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of this. I want to get my friends involved. I don't think you should always, in some situations, but people are so involved and so excited about what you're doing, they're going to automatically write a check. It's not going to be a need for that. And I will tell you this one example because this was pretty powerful to me. We were at an event, it was a gala, and I had the auctioneer come in and he was getting ready to start. He's like, Gloria, do you still want to start at 50? I'm not sure. I think we should go lower. And I said, no, I think we need to stick at 50. He came back around to me, he said, Gloria, I'm not feeling it. I really don't think we should start at 50. And I said, you know what? I am reading it and I know all of these donors in the room, my staff are telling me the same, and we could just feel the energy. And when you've done fundraising for that long and you just feel it, and he walked away and he was like, okay. And he went up on stage and he started out with 50. And within 2 seconds, someone came up with their paddle. And I think that's when I knew the donors, my staff knew the donors, my board knew the donors. We knew who was in the room and we knew it could happen. And we stuck to it. And we said, no, it's going to happen. And it did.
Yeah, it did. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, what practical steps can organizations take to begin shifting from the transactional fundraising to movement building fundraising?
First of all, instead of having those pressure ask types of things, start with, a partnership and really looking at what you can build. And don't think it's going to be something that's going to pay off quickly. It's going to take time. Um, and I think looking at things like we may not do that now, but shifting to the possibility that that could be something we could do. Let's look at that. Let's have a further conversation. And have them say, why they believe that's important. And then say, well, you know what, that may not be something we can do right now. However, let's continue that conversation. I've said it, building relationships, you have to have individuals trust you. And the trust is built through relationships. We all know that. And having donors, when donors say, well, what else could I do? I'm so glad you asked. I really, really would love for you to be a champion for me. Would you tell your story? Would you help with a video? Would you put that together? Would you, post something on your LinkedIn or your Facebook that's telling what you're doing? And, we have to make sure that it's feeling less like a solicitation and more about a movement because you're seeing others, gravitating to what's being done to create that movement. And I think my best advice is decide what needs to be done first because you can't do everything at once because you won't be successful. So take one step at a time. And if it's, I need to really focus on my major gift program, we'll focus on that. And there might be some questions around, well, do I need to see if I have the right donors to do a major gift program? Start at a small major gift program. It doesn't have to be huge. Just start where you
Right.
are and build it out. And I think that's key. And looking at your data, I'm going to say one of the best investments is a CRM tool and making sure you have the CRM tool that's being utilized, not
Yeah.
only by your staff team, by your volunteers on making sure that they're keeping up with sharing details with you. I know when I have my board members call and say thank you to donors, I say, these are the things I need back, and I need it back immediately after your call if you can, because I want to get that in the tool as well. And making sure we're then inviting that same board member that's called to say thank you to that next meeting so they can hear about what's going on. So I think there's a variety of things that can be small steps, we don't have to start by trying to figure it all out at once.
Yeah, thank goodness. Well,
Yeah.
what about language? How does language shape this transformation?
I think there's a couple things. I've worked in not-for-profit for quite some time, and I think that I can and we will is key message to get across. Creating that vision and saying, okay, let's break this down and solve for it. And what are we going to do as an organization to make this happen? And having all parties part of that conversation. And so I think it's a mindset, to be honest, as
Hmm.
well. And celebrating wins. So you're talking about language. I think it's about sharing what's been done because of what's been happening. And then
Right.
also talking with the donors and saying, you know what? I'm not going to ask you for a gift right now today. I want to ask you to join a movement. And I want to see what you think you can do with this movement. This is our challenge, and this is where we're at. What is it that we can do together in partnership? And these are some areas that maybe aren't our greatest strengths. Is there anything you can help by leaning in on that? There's nothing like using the resources of donors and individuals that are part of our organization and to help us lift all together.
Yeah, love it. I see many organizations hesitating to stand out because they maybe fear alienating donors. So why is being different now a necessity rather than a risk?
It's a necessity because there are so many not-for-profits out there looking for support. All
Nice.
wonderful, wonderful
Right.
organizations. However, there's only so much out there. And you have to show that you're doing things differently. You have to show what it's like to be engaged with your organization. And it's important to put yourself out there. If you're not being seen and you're not visible in the community, donors are going to wonder where are you? So even, I've thought about, executive, presence. You think about organizational presence. Think about what is the message that we're sending? How are you being creative? And if you're not picking up on those things, you're not going to be able to show how you're different, how you're, I think of it like this. Sometimes you have to be a little edgy. And the risk is important because you have to get those donors involved in what you're doing and showing what you're doing and what your best work is.
Hmm. Do you think most organizations know what makes them unique or special or different? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about really sharing with others what makes an organization or special, unique. Do most organizations have an understanding of that?
And I think yes and no. I think there's clear mission statements and vision statements. And I think that how it's articulated sometimes can be muddied, possibly, or unclear, I guess I would say. And it's because the vision has not been articulated continuously. And I think that the belief in the vision needs to be if you think you're going to plant a garden, you have to water it. You have to water those seeds to have them sprout. And I think that it's really, really important for organizations to focus. If you have too many things that you're doing, then it becomes diluted. And I think
Hmm.
that's when you have a challenge. Now, that's not to say there's wraparound opportunities for some organizations. However, the disruptive piece is really saying, I'm not going to do the same old, same old. I may not put as much funding into, direct mail campaigns. Now, some people say direct mail is, not working anymore. Well, some places it is working, but let's
Right.
focus on what's going to have the greatest ROI. And I think you need to start and stop doing certain things. And I think that's when the disruption, when it's the comfortable, well, we've always done this. This is the way we do it. I think that we have to change that up.
Yeah. Does it require an organization or the fundraisers to sacrifice authenticity, or is it a way to bring more authenticity forward?
Oh, I definitely believe it's bringing more authenticity forward. It's that relationship that's really going to get you to that disruptive fundraising type of phase. And it's disruptive in a couple of ways. You're not asking for a gift right at the beginning. I think of a corporation, you build your deck, and we've called it a pitch deck over the years. Well, it's not necessarily a pitch deck. It's telling the story, and then it's saying, this is what we're doing based on our research about your organization. Here's how we see some alignment. Could we do to help your organization help your employees in this particular way as it relates to, housing, hunger, disease? How are we going to be able to help you? And then we would like to, figure out ways that you would, and, employ, helping us. And so I think it's, not have, I've pulled out the ask in decks, and I almost don't even call it a pitch deck anymore, but you pull it out. Let's get to know each other first and feel comfortable about that. And then it will naturally turn into something that's going to work and be a win-win for both organizations.
Mhm, mhm. Well, let's talk about sort of the team, the leadership team, the development team. I think it seems to me that you need to build internal confidence in order to disrupt traditional fundraising approaches. Have confidence, have a certain amount of agreement in order to push beyond what we've always done into something new or different. And how do teams do that?
That's hard. It's very, very hard. And it's creating that vision and continuously, you know, embracing it and talking about the why, asking the team, what is your why? What is it that is not, sinking for you? And as leaders, you need to make sure that you have your executive team all on the same page, and to make sure that you're removing doubts, you're engaging the team in the design of what you're doing. Ultimately, everyone is leading for good. So how are we going to make sure that those open conversations are being had? And then when we walk out of the room, it's okay, we're going to go in this direction and be supported. And I think that, you know, it's uncomfortable. I think about KPIs. We have all of these KPIs that we're trying to manage too. And showing, the small wins along the way, I think is going to help people understand, and teams understand that this can be done. Let's take one step at a time. We don't have to run. We have to crawl, and then we have to walk. And I think that's how you get the buy-in with the team. And when they see the win, they're amazed, and they're like, I get it now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are some examples where you've seen that win, where the willingness to be distinctive fuels growth or positive momentum?
You got me on that one, Chris.
Yeah. Well, we can reframe it. And, um, in your own personal experience, like where have you seen success where the organization's willingness to be unique or distinctive has created success or growth, fueled momentum?
Hmm. I think it's going to go back to the changing of the gala,
Mhm.
and really mixing things up a bit and creating experiences for individuals that were, provided a wow. If you think about it, everybody goes to a gala. We all, figure out, well, what's going to make that different, and
Right.
how are we going to evolve? And I think that for me, it was putting the pieces in place that made sure that everything was extremely special about that everyone would be talking about it the next day. And
Very good.
when you hear about that and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's talking about this made a difference. We made an impact. And then capturing, those conversations that people had, that you can replay them, you can re-engage those individuals, you can continue to talk about it because it's going to be a true journey. So I think for me, when you're able to turn that corner to what you're doing around a grants program, what you're doing with major gifts, and how you're engaging people, when you can turn that corner and say, wow, we were able to do this, that's the story you need to tell, and you need to build upon that because that's where the success is because you're winning in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And is that how you distinguish a certain kind of fundraising activity or campaign from a movement?
Ask that again, I'm sorry.
I wanted to know what distinguishes a fundraising campaign from a movement.
Okay, yes. So I think a fundraising campaign versus a movement is really looking at a fundraising campaign. You look at, okay, these are the certain, donors or constituents that we're going to be targeting or going after. And we figure out, is it going to be an appeal? Is it going to be a certain conversation? What does that look like? And I believe a movement is inviting individuals in to hear the conversation, looking what we're wanting to do, and then asking their thoughts on that, and them coming to it on their own on how they would like to be a participant in that movement and moving forward. Because if you're telling the story and you're engaging them in the right way, doesn't need to be a direct solicitation. They're going to make a gift that's probably even and most of the times that I've had is larger than you anticipated because you've told the story so well and you've engaged them with that relationship. So I think it's when you think of a campaign, you talk about it. That's what you talk about, the fundraising campaign. This is what we're going to do. But when you're creating a movement, it's we have a campaign to do X for an organization. We're creating a movement that we want to get, increased. We want to increase our momentum, that we're going to continue that momentum through multiple generations because people are starting to hear about it and they're hearing about it from others. And when you have a movement, you're coming from a groundswell of engagement from our donors versus a campaign that's been laid out and articulated in a way that this is what we need to do and these are the steps that we need to take.
Yeah. So in a movement, it sounds like the way you define success or you can identify success is that the donors themselves uh, give more and they have by virtue of their connection to the movement are inviting others to be involved as well. Do I
Yes,
have
for
that
sure.
correct?
Definitely. Yes, correct.
Yay. Yay, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. For executive directors or development leaders listening today, what's one shift they can make immediately to begin building a movement instead of simply raising funds?
I think that the first thing would be to identify the space in which you want to create the movement. What is the movement going to be around? And then, figuring out what that story is going to be, identifying your champions that are going to help start telling that story, your board members, the grateful individual that's potentially being helped. It goes back to that storytelling piece. However, making sure that those individuals continue to be brought in to continue to talk about this is a movement. This is not something that needs to that has an end. I think that's the other difference between a movement. It's continuous, and you need to make sure that there is no end because there's no end until our work is done, and our work's going to keep going. So I think inviting those people in, having them be a part of the architecture of putting it together and saying, okay, now how are we going to cross that over, not only with these individuals, but now how are we going to market it? That's so
Yeah.
key. Marketing is goes a long way. And you have to, come from a place of, that authenticity is so key, and take deliberate steps that are going to help move things forward.
Good, good. Well, I definitely like that distinction between the campaign, which has a a definitive start and end date and a particular goal to reach in that time frame versus a movement which needs to be timeless, be evergreen, everlasting, and hopefully accomplish far more than any single campaign can. So uh, those would probably be great takeaways for anyone, any fundraiser listening to this. With the last few questions that we have, what advice would you give to a development leader who wants to innovate but feels constrained, either constrained by the board expectations or constrained by other staff or just history?
Mhm. I would say creativity is just phenomenal. I think you need to be innovative. You need to be different. And I think what's most important is finding the support or the data that's going to drive that. You need to
Okay.
you need to talk about telling the why. And if you can show the data shows that yes, we can do this, or that this is a way that we need to go. I think it's all about getting the buy-in and getting a champion and looking at what other people are doing. There is no, we talked about it. There are many, many, many not-for-profits. And you find out, well, wow, that's working really well for them. Let me understand that a little bit more and see what I can apply to our organization. So I think it's really not, it's a, harebrained idea. It's a idea that I've researched. I've figured out some things that are unique about it. And I think this is why it could be a win for us. So I think it's doing the due diligence and the research to say, this is an innovative idea, and I really like to, move this forward and get some feedback and have others poke holes in it by all means. And so I think that it's not, I have this idea, let's do it. It's, I have this idea and this is why. And these are the steps I think we would need to take to make sure that it could potentially be successful.
Lovely. All right, so let's assume you were walking into an organization for the first time. You've just been hired to sort of lead development at this organization. What would be the first thing you would examine to assess whether fundraising is transactional or transformational?
Well, I think it would be a conversation with all the development staff. It would be, how are things going? How are you managing this? How are you looking at the gifts that, came in year over year? And, looking at what they're doing as it relates to the relationships. You can almost tell when you walk into a new organization and development team, if you're how many people are out in the field. I have to be honest, you have to meet with your donors. How are we building those relationships? So I think that, finding out, well, what are the revenue streams that are coming in? What do they look like? How are they being implemented? How many relationships are out there being built? Looking at the opportunities and asking the team, what do you see as the greatest opportunity? I mean, everybody's got some great ideas, and to say, well, I love it. Let's put that on the list and figure that out a little bit more. But I think it's doing a lot of listening, talking to people, meeting with donors, finding out what's working for them. There's always a place sometimes when you go into a new organization, and there's someone always has an opinion they want to share, and
Mhm.
bring them on. I want to hear about it because some of them are going to be phenomenal, and some of them are going to be opportunities that we need to embrace. And so I would just really look at how things are being done.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I have to imagine that if people do have ideas, it's more likely that you're going to find an organization that's attempting to be transformational as opposed to those that are scared to do anything different whatsoever out of fear of failure, and that would maybe sort of lend itself more to the transactional side of things.
Mhm.
But I like that sort of listening tour coming in, meeting with the folks to find out their impressions of the things. I think that's wise to be able to assess the situation whenever you come in. Yeah. Any last advice that you'd give the audience around this idea of being disruptive?
I would say take the risk. I think that risk taking is important and it stirs things up for you. Be uncomfortable because once you get comfortable, things do become a little bit standardized and, not as innovative. And, also step away, learn from others. And I think about the things that we read, there's so much out there around philanthropy and, there's some darn good ideas. So let's pull from other places and be purposeful in your learning and asking those tough questions of others. Say, how did you do that? How did you move that forward? Because we're all in this together. We all, in the not-for-profit world, it's a big world, but guess what? We all want to lift one another up. And I think that that's key that, hey, let's talk about that. I want to pick your brain. I mean, I go to events and I see something and I'm like, oh, I like that. And so I think sometimes we have to pause because we do move very quickly in the not-for-profit world and we have to stop and assess. And I think that's really, really important.
Such good advice. Well, Gloria, this has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you for challenging us to think what fundraising can be and reminding us that donors are not just checkbooks, right? They're potential partners in possibility. And to our listeners, if today's conversation sparked new thinking for you, we encourage you to like and subscribe to Mastering Fundraising so you don't miss any future episodes. And also check out our other podcasts, Lead for Good and The Nonprofit Edge, where we continue to explore leadership, strategy, and the competencies that move organizations forward. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep building movements that matter. Bye, all.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum nonprofit leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.